Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to an extra special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I have Tony Robinson with me today, and we're joined by a man who has written over 20 books about Burnley FC, dating all the way back to 2002, 2003. His first book was called It's Burnley Not Barcelona. And ever since then, he has really been the preeminent voice of the club, chronicling every team, players, coaches, managers. We're just so excited to welcome to the show Dave Thomas. Welcome to the show, Dave.
You know, I've got tears in my eyes listening to all that. I'm overcome. Hang on, I'm going to get my hanky. No, thanks for that great introduction. It's a pleasure to talk to you, it really is. I mean, that first book, It's Burnley Not Barcelona. I mean, the story behind that is that I was still teaching at the time, just about. I'd been headmaster of a principal, you'd call it, of a small village school. And then I took a retirement from that and just did supply and part-time work in schools. And I had this huge fund of stories about life in school, because I worked in a funny little school where all sorts of funny things happen all the time. So I rang up a publisher and I said, "Look, I've got all these wonderful stories about being a headmaster, the kids, the parents, the staff." And he said, "Oh, well, hang on. I don't do books like that. I do football books." Well, I had no idea. So this guy called Parswood Press, he did football books. And I said, "Oh, well, hang on. I just happen to keep a diary about Burnley Football Club. Simultaneously, I always wrote copious diaries." And he said, "Oh, I'll publish that." Just like that. "I'll publish that. I'll do that." Well, it was never any intention to publish this as a book, the football diaries. So anyway, they got to the end of the season, and I sent it to him. And he said, "I can't publish that. It's libelous." Because being a diary, you put your own thoughts into it. You put down what you actually think, not what people want you to think. "I can't do that. It's libelous." Anyway, he said, "But so I said, okay, I'll redo it. I'll take the bad bits out and I'll rework it." And I said, "But it's Burnley." He said, "Well, that's all right. Burnley books sell, and you're a headmaster, so you must be able to write English." Well, little did he know that Burnley books don't sell that well anyway. He was under this great misconception that he was going to make his fortune selling Burnley books. Well, that didn't happen. So he published the book, and it came out in end of the season, perhaps August-ish, after the end of the previous season. And within a couple of months, I got a phone call from somebody in Burnley. Dave, said this voice, "I've just seen your new book, your first book. It's Burnley Not Barcelona. And they're selling them for a couple of pounds in the remainder shop." I said, "You what? The remainder shop?" So I phoned the publisher, and he'd gone bankrupt. So that's my after-dinner story. That's how I always start anything with that story. My first ever book put the publisher bankrupt. He went out of business, and that's why he was selling them all off cheap. So it was a bit disappointing with that. He made no fortune. I made no fortune, but it gave me the bug to write more books. I thought, once I've done one, I enjoyed this. It was great. It was wonderful. You get your first book in your hand, the first print, the first copy, and you think, "God, I've done that. That's me. That's the result of all my work," and it's a terrific feeling. So it gave me the yen to do more books, and that's why I've done one a year. Sometimes two a year ever since. Well, that's the first book. It put the publisher out of business.
That's a great story, a good start to kick off, and it's a thrill for me to talk to you about Burnley. And as I say, I have met you and got a book signed from you back in, I think, September 2017. And
oh, really? Where would that have been? At the club, or?
Yeah, I just met you outside.
Did we meet before a game or something like that?
Yeah, just beside the shop.
Outside the shop. Yeah. And what book was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, Seeing Through the Noise.
Seeing Through the Noise, that's right. Now, that was the book about... Oh, God. I did a couple of books which I self-published, and that was one of them. Just did a couple of 100 copies, and they all sold okay. So the publisher I used then didn't always want to do another Burnley book. So we spaced them out, and then one or two I did it under my own steam, and I got my money back. They all sold. And I had a really good chap that I knew really very well. He was a designer. He was in printing. He did all the layouts and he got it all sorted out. He was the link between me and the printers. And it worked out extremely well. I think I've done 3 books like that on my own, self-published.
I think what I enjoyed is not only the summary of the season, each match, but the way you wove into your books comical stories involving yourself or other people that sort of make you chuckle when you read it, and you can sort of relate in some ways to some of the stories that you tell.
Well, I like it when people say that, because I've read football diaries of other people, and I think, God, this is boring.
Yeah,
they're facts, figures, times of the corner, times of the goal, but there's no life in them. There's no background. And a friend of mine is a publisher, but he does science fiction, so he doesn't do my books. He does science fiction, and he always said to me, Dave, when you're writing a book, don't look just straight ahead. Look left and look right. And he said, if you understand what I mean by that, you can be a writer. In other words, you want the details. You want what's going on around you, at the side of you, in front of you, the history, the tidbits, the anecdotes, all that kind of thing. And that's the wonderful thing about Burnley Football Club. There's so many wonderful, great players, so many wonderful stories. There's such history, such tradition. There's so much to fall back on and weave into it.
Well, that's one of the things that, and not to give away your age, but you've been following the club for quite a long time, and you would go back. When do you remember your first match at Burnley?
I do, and I think I was about 11 years old. Might have been 9, I'm not sure. And it was 1957, and it was that kind of father-son thing. The father wants to get his son involved in football, so he took me to see Manchester United. And this is the time of the Busby Babes.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I can picture it clearly. They played in a blue strip, and I thought, this is Man United. Where's the red shirts? And it was such a letdown. Blue shirts, rubbish. So I was bored sick. So that was the end of that for a couple of years. And then of my own free will, 59-60, I decided I'd like to go again. I think I was 15. I forget how old I was. Might have been 12, I forget. But that's when I started going again with my father and some school pals. That was the big thing. You're going with your school pals. And we had a tiny little car, and it would chug up the valley with my father and 3 or 4 pals. And it just about, with three gear, an old-fashioned 3-gear car. And it chugged up the valley, got to Burnley. And that was the 59-60 season when they won the title. I mean, what a brilliant start for your first season.
Well,
so that's when I start. So I'm 175 tomorrow.
Well, it's similar to how I started going, because I remember my first match was a Boxing Day, and my dad took me, and I would probably be 8 or 9. And when I picked Burnley to support. My dad said, well, you got to get a paper round. And then I used to take the bus from Accrington to the town centre and walk up to Turf Moor.
Kids now don't know what a paper round is, do they? I did a paper round. You earned your pocket money.
Yeah.
But kids today, do they know what a paper round is? I mean, I don't know about American kids. Do they do a paper round on their bicycles still?
Well, I'm old enough to remember paper routes. They don't have them over here anymore. But I'll tell you, when you mention paper, the thing that pops to mind for me more than anything else is that I'm old enough to remember that if I missed the game on television or the radio the night before, there was no finding out who won until the paper came the next morning.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Now, I'll tell you a little story. I learned to read by reading in the early days. I learnt to read long words by reading the football reports to my father on a Sunday morning.
Excellent.
That was my reading exercise, my reading practice. Read in the Sunday Express was one newspaper. What else was there in those days? The People, the Sunday Herald, I think, was another one.
Yeah,
but that's what we do. Reading the Sunday News of the World, reading the football reports to my father on a Sunday morning.
You mentioned the first book you did, and one of the things that it stuck out to me about that book was you said it was the most financially difficult season since the Orient game in '87. I'm curious if you could expand on that to our listeners.
Well, what Burnley had been through, the Football League had done a deal with a television company called ITV, Independent Television Company, I think it was called, ITV. And ITV had put big money into all the Football League clubs in exchange for exclusive television rights. And so clubs were budgeting, they were allocating their budget on the strength of the money that had been promised by the ITV television companies. Now, it all went belly up. It wasn't cost effective. And ITV pulled out of that deal. And they were able to pull out of it because nobody had checked the small print in the contracts between the clubs and ITV, the television company. So they pulled out, the money dried up, and suddenly clubs had overspent. They'd bought players, especially Burnley. At that time, Stan Turner was manager, Barry Kilby was chairman. They'd budgeted on the expectation of being paid £3 or £4 million a year by the ITV television company. And it all stopped. But they'd bought players, they'd organised huge contracts, and suddenly it ended. They'd to shed players, they'd to cut wages, they'd to sell players. Suddenly, they'd no money because they'd done this stupid thing. Instead of waiting to get the money in year by year, they'd said to themselves, right, we've got this contract for the next 3 years, so we can budget for the next 3 years. So they planned their spending for the next 3 years, but in fact, after 1 year, the money dried up. So not just Burnley, no end of clubs were left high and dry. So that's the story of that season. And Stan Turner's final season, when the situation was even worse, when they'd even less money, it was a miracle that he kept that club in the Championship. Now, funnily enough, I was with Stan Turner yesterday, going through some of the sections and stories in the newest book, and I'll get this little plug in now, then we've done it. This is a book about a player called Paul Weller. Now, Paul Weller was a good, gutsy little player, born and bred in Brighton, in the Brighton area, came to Burnley as a 16-year-old, stayed at Burnley for the next 12 years or so, a one-club man. But in his career, after 3 or 4 years, he began a serious illness, colitis. Now, colitis is a horrendous illness. And at its worst, I won't go into it, at its worst, it would stop anybody from being a sportsman. But he was out of the game for a couple of years, almost. But he got back, he recovered, he was in hospital, operations. It's an intestinal illness, and it's really quite serious. But he came back into the game. And I thought, well, there's a good book in this. It's a classic story of a sportsman who might have had his dreams shattered, but who gets over it, comes back, gets back into the game, and within a year, he was the supporters' player of the season. And that's some story. This is the time when Ian Wright came to the club, Gazza came to the club. He played with Chris Waddle when Waddle was manager. So there's lots and lots of stories. But some of these stories are quite fanciful from players like Glenn Little. Now, Glenn Little is a born storyteller. If you get the chance, check out on YouTube a program called Under the Cosh. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Darren Woodhead listens to that
Under the
regularly.
Cosh, there's 2 sessions with Robbie Blake, and there's 2 sessions with Glenn Little. Now, Glenn Little is an absolute born storyteller. But there's four lads and they're sitting around a table and they're having a few pints, having a few beers, having a glass of wine. So the tales get taller, they get embroidered, they get fanciful. And I thought, some of these stories, I better check that. And they're mostly stories about Stan Ternent, because it was such a, not controversial, it was such a different style of manager. And some of the stories that Glenn tells about Stan Ternent make your hair curl. So I thought I better go and see Stan and check through some of these stories with him. So that's what I was doing yesterday. And some of the stories, Dave, that's just an absolute rubbish. That's rubbish. That's a lie. That's not true. Or he'd say, yeah, that's a true story. That's a true story. So I've been through the book, sifting out the ones that Stan says are absolute rubbish, and then adding to the ones where Stan's given a bit more detail. So that was a great exercise. So Paul Weller is there. He was a Stan Ternent player, and Stan is doing the foreword for the book as well. So that I'm really pleased about that. So that's what we were working on yesterday.
Now
the Paul Weller is the newest book. It'll be out in March next year, and it's just a story of a sportsman getting over a really serious illness, getting back into the game, and becoming supporters, player of the year. Good story. With lots of cracking stories in it. Oh, my God. Oh, I'm not going to tell you now. You'll have to buy the
book. You touched on Stan, and you've seen a lot of managers come and go at Burnley. In your time, who would you rate as the overall best manager that you've seen?
Overall best? Well, it's got to be a choice between Harry Potts and Sean Dyche. I think you've got to lean towards Sean Dyche for what he's achieved. Well, the Premiership of the 5th season, next season, that is an astonishing achievement, getting them back into Europe at a club that isn't a wealthy club. It's only got a small fan base. Now, Harry Potts, great manager, a great man manager, but he had two players at his fingertips, Jimmy McIlroy and Jimmy Adamson. And they were, in many ways, they did the work for him. And that's why Adamson goes on to become a manager. Now, Adamson wasn't the greatest of managers. He was a better coach than a manager.
Right.
He got them promoted, of course, back from Division 2 to Division 1. And they had one glorious season. And he always said, we're going to be the team of the 70s. But then Bob Lord, every year, sold the best player.
Well, that leads me on.
Ralph Coates went.
Yeah, and when it was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it, in the early '60s when he sold McIlroy to Stoke, and there was a lot of questions why that was. Was it simply money?
I don't think anybody will ever find out the real answer. I think there are a number of actual facts that form the background. Jimmy at that time was forever injured. He hardly trained. One or two of the younger players were getting a bit fed up of him and wanted a similar wage. They were only on half the money that Jimmy was on. There's all sorts of stories in the background that this person didn't like him, that person didn't like him. But the bottom line is nobody will ever really know the real reason why McIlroy was sold. Things came to a head after a cup game at Liverpool when they lost. They'd drawn the first game at Burnley 1-1, I think, then went to Liverpool, gifted Liverpool a goal, either from a poor goal kick. I forget, but they lost the replay. And there was some controversy after that. It was because Jimmy always went home in somebody else's car. He never went on the coach. Maybe the other players thought he was a bit of a diva. Maybe they were resentful that he wasn't training properly. And the truth is, he was past his best.
Yeah.
But it was also a very bad winter that winter. The winter of 63, January, February, was horrendous. No games were played for about 8-9 weeks. The club had no money coming in. And so somebody had to be sold. And I think Bob Lord thought, well, McIlroy's past his best. He's becoming a bit of a diva. He'll have to go. He's got to go.
Well, and that was the time after 62, and that leads into one of your other books you did about Jimmy Adamson. the man who said no to England. That was after he come back from the World Cup, and I think it was the longest manager in England's history was Winterbottom. Resigned, and is that when they offered Jimmy the job?
He was definitely offered the job. He certainly was, but he turned it down. I think the root cause we'll never really know was that his wife, was she called May? I think she was called May. Just didn't want to leave Burnley. Adamson always said, "Well, look, I've still got some years as a player left. I want to carry on playing." But I also think in the background, although Bob Lord at the time said, "What a massive honour this is. They want Jimmy as England manager." But I think already Bob Lord was telling Jimmy Adamson, "You are my next manager." This is my guess, that he was saying to Jimmy, "Look, you stay here. I'll see you right. One day you're going to be my next manager. Harry won't be manager forever." And I think from that point on, Jimmy knew one day he'd be manager, and it couldn't come soon enough. And that's why the sort of antipathy developed between Adamson and Harry Potts. He wanted Harry's job. And when he did get the job, and Harry was sort of shunted upstairs to this managing director role, Adamson even stopped speaking to him. The relationship between the two was horrendous. Horrendous. And Adamson actually banned Potts from the training ground.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard stories that the relationship was I guess strained to say the least.
It was rock bottom. Rock bottom.
Yeah. One of the things before I just open it up to Phil for a question. I gotta ask you this because I think it's a comical question or a little story. When you mentioned when you were living in Leeds and after a match at Turf Moor, you would stop in at your parents and she would do the crusty potato pie and you with a jar of pickled cabbage. What was tell everybody what was tell everybody what the secret ingredient of your mum's your mum's potato pie was.
But potatoes and stewing steak, potatoes, onions, lots and lots of gravy, but lots of potatoes, lots of meat, lots of steak, with a crust. The ideal pie has crust all the way around, top and bottom, pastry top and bottom.
But did she used to make them when she was having a cigarette in her mouth?
Oh, that's a true story. I was 18 before I realised that cigarette ash wasn't part of a recipe. Because whatever she made, Yorkshire puddings, apple pies, braised steak. That was a horrible meal she used to cook. She was never the greatest cook in the world. She did it unwillingly, but she did make a damn good pie. And my memory of my mother, God rest her soul, is standing over the bowl, or whatever, over the pan, stirring, with a cigarette in it, dangling in her mouth, and the ash getting longer and longer and longer, and eventually it would plop into the pie, or into the Yorkshire pudding mix. And that's the truth. Now, on top of that, my father had a glass eye. And he was a really good golfer, my father. But sadly, he got a cancer behind one of his eyes, or a growth, and he had to have the eye taken out. So they put a glass eye in. Now, he had the habit of, during a meal, true story, of taking his eye out and putting it close to the mashed potatoes, and he'd say, "By gum, mother, these mashed potatoes sure look good," with his glass eye. Now, he got in trouble at the golf club as well. He got in trouble at the golf club because when he had his glass eye, you know how golfers will address the ball. They'll stand over it. They'll look at the lie of the land. They'll look how far the putt is. They'll look which way it slopes, this, that, and the other. Well, he would take out his glass eye and he'd hold it close to the ball. And then he'd hold it up in the light and he'd look through his glass eye, which is in his fingers, in his hand, at the little hole, and then put his eye back in. Well, anyway, he was asked to stop doing that because some of his put some of his opponents off their game. So he got in trouble for doing that.
I got one story. Sorry, Phil. I got one quick story.
Oh, no problem.
About the glass eye. I don't know, Dave, if you ever have heard of the photographer from Accrington, Garth Dawson, that did a lot of Stanley matches and is well known in the area for taking pictures for the Accrington Observer. Anyway, he found a glass eye one time in the house. He actually bought the house that used to be occupied by the Stanley players in '62, and he took a glass eye. He took a glass eye and put it in the knot of a tree outside his house, and and used to take pictures of people's reaction as they walked by.
Lovely. Well, it's a great trick. I mean, when I was a teacher, I used to go to the museum library in Leeds, where you could borrow various things from the central store. And I used to borrow a skeleton, and I used to sit in the front seat of the car with a Burnley scarf wrapped around its neck. And then I would drive back from the museum basement back to the school, through the city centre, and at the traffic lights you'd have to stop, and people sitting in the bus next to me in the car, and I'm sitting with a skeleton in the front seat with a Burnley scarf wrapped round its neck, and the looks I got. It was priceless. It was wonderful. I never got tired of doing that.
Well, Tony has some fun questions that he likes to ask, and those are going to be coming up next. But before we get to that, I did have one thing that I really wanted to ask you about here, and I've been kind of going through and looking at your different books that you've written here over the past few days, and kind of reading some summaries and things like that. And the one that really jumped out at me that I just had to ask you about is one that you wrote about the 2006-2007 season called "Russians Don't Land Here."
I know. I think it sold about 10 copies. That was a local printer cum publisher who, to keep his presses going, always did a Burnley book if I asked him to do it. And I had this yen to do, a lovely big paperback for under £10, which we did. And it's full of great stuff. Now that's Steve Cottrell, isn't it? That's all about Steve Cottrell. And Cotter ball, we called it, where the ball was up in the air 90% of the time, and you got a stiff neck from watching the ball up in the air. And Cottrell's theory was, if the ball is up in the air, the opposition haven't got it, and they're not going to score. So hence you got these stratospheric goal kicks from Brian Jensen, and my God, they nearly hit the moon. So it took about 5 minutes for the ball to go up into the air to reach its top point, then 5 minutes to come down again. And it's absolutely true. That was 10 minutes of the game where the opposition couldn't score, and it worked a treat. So that book, I think it sold about 10 copies. I don't know why. It never really took off.
Well, I definitely like to have one. And it's one of those ones where if I had seen it on the bookshelf, I would have just had to buy it because the cover and the title and everything is just so interesting to me. And we were talking about pies earlier, and one thing I noticed on the little blurb about the Russians Don't Land Here is something about your lowest moment being the taste of the potato, cheese, onion pie at QPR.
At Queen's Park Rangers.
Yeah, what was
at
so
Queen's
bad
Park
about
Rangers.
the QPR pies?
It was absolutely dire. I've never tasted anything. I either forgot to take it out of the plastic wrapper and ate it with the wrapper on. That's the only explanation I can think of for why it tasted so awful. It was absolutely dire. And it's a poor ground to go to anyway. It's an awful ground. It needs pulling down. The way that you're squeezed in, there's no room for your knees, and getting out afterwards. It's an awful experience all round. It's Queen's Park Rangers. The other one is Rotherham. Rotherham in the north of England. If you've never been to Rotherham, don't. They've got a new football ground now, but the old Rotherham football ground was unbelievably awful. And they've got a new one now, which has got, I'm sure it's got some name like Hollywood, something like that. I'll check up on that. I'm not sure. Oh. So yeah, things not to do in England Rotherham is one of them.
Rotherham.
I will definitely keep
and the
note of
QPR
that.
pie is the other.
Yeah.
I know that the Accrington pies are the ones that I'm looking to try.
Yeah, Burnley pies are not bad, but the trouble is I'm not allowed to eat a Burnley pie because we go as a family. My wife is with me, and she knows if I sneak a pie. She has this uncanny radar, so I'm not allowed to eat a pie at Burnley. I'd love one. It's part of the day, isn't it? Pie and peas.
Oh yeah,
That's a treat I have to.
And the Holland's pies in Accrington are world famous, if you want to say that. Really,
World
Holland's
famous.
pies.
Absolutely, world famous.
Well, peas might be a good introduction to Tony's next section. So, Tony, why don't you take the floor? This is actually, Dave, this has become our most popular segment on the show, and it's just something that we have a little bit of fun
where your star guest sings and dances.
It's right up there with your 10 copies of the Russians have landed.
Right, go on then, yeah.
This is just some fun questions, and it started out really more of a north versus south thing, but we've sort of incorporated a lot of different things into it. But first of all, I think we know the answer to this one: mushy or garden peas?
Oh God, mushy, of course, mushy.
If you have a full English, is it with black pudding, without?
I can do either. I'm not keen on black pudding, but I tend to leave the black pudding. Not keen.
Okay. On a music note, Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Oh Lord, oh crikey, neither. I'm jazz. I'm piano jazz.
Soap operas, Coronation Street or EastEnders?
Oh my God, Coronation Street.
Who was? And this is from Darren Woodhead. Who was the best Burnley football player you ever saw live?
Oh, you got to say Jimmy McIlroy, but even then, I never saw him at his best. Jimmy McIlroy at his best is probably 57, 58, 55. I saw him 59, 60. Even then, he was absolutely brilliant. But then you've got Leighton James, you've got Ralph Coates. Robbie Blake was a little genius. But I guess I'd have to say Jimmy McIlroy.
And what best player to play at Turf Moor that didn't play for Burnley?
Dave Mackay, or Jimmy Greaves, or Danny Blanchflower, all Tottenham players. Can't separate them. I'll never forget seeing, again, it's the 59-60 season, when there was no glamour in football. And footballers didn't do tricks either. They didn't do, stunts with the ball. Dave Mackay comes along, and it's just before the match, and they're warming up. And he's doing things with the football that we'd never seen before, kicking it with spin so that it bounced back to himself. We'd never seen that. Doing keepy-uppies. Nobody ever did that. It was brilliant, just brilliant.
On your bacon sandwich.
I never actually saw George Best play.
I did see him at Turf Moor. I did see him, and he's probably the best player I saw live outside of a Burnley team.
Yeah.
So,
there were some great players in the Chelsea team. Was it Burnley's first season in the Premier? Or was it Sean Dyche's first season? And Chelsea came and won 5 something. There were some great players in that side. Oh, Drogba, of course. So Drogba. He was just magnificent.
Drogba played for Phoenix Rising over here. I actually had the honor of seeing Drogba play here in Phoenix. He was 41, 42 years old.
Really?
It's still the best player on the pitch. He the last game that he ever played as a professional was actually what's called the USL Championship, which is the second tier over here, and it was in the championship match, and unfortunately Phoenix Rising ended up losing that 1-0. But Drogba let us. He's actually part owner of the club, and he played for. It was at the 2017-18 season, and the 2018.
I never realised he was playing for so long.
Yeah, in 2019, October of 2019 was his last game. So
wow,
yeah,
I never knew
he
that.
came over here to Phoenix, and probably for sure the best player that I've seen play live here in the States, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Just a couple more quick ones here from me on your bacon sandwich, red or brown sauce.
Red.
Name 2 people, past or present, you would like to have dinner with, and why?
Oh gosh, Donald Trump, because I've just got to see if his hair's real, and oh my God, I can't think of it. Well, I would have said Jimmy McIlroy, but that was a great weekend doing the Jimmy McIlroy book. He actually, he's my boyhood hero.
Yeah.
And doing the 2 books with Jimmy McIlroy, was with him every week over in Burnley. And then he came to stay in my house for a couple of weekends while we could do some of the stories in depth. And he was here a couple of weekends. And I remember on one Sunday morning, he's in the kitchen in his pajamas with a mug of coffee in his hand. And I'm thinking, bloody hell, this is Jimmy McIlroy in my kitchen. And it was surreal. By this time, of course, he's in his late 60s.
Yeah.
So, but I thought, this is my boyhood here. And when you're a kid and you play football, you always pretend to be somebody, don't you?
Yes.
And we do. And in our school game sessions, we'd be playing football on the park. You'd say, Bagsy being Jimmy McIlroy, Bagsy being Jimmy Adamson, or whatever. And I'm thinking, he's in my kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hands, in his pajamas. I mean, it was surreal. It was surreal.
Where's your the favorite getaway for you and your wife Harriet?
Oh, well, we go to Tenerife. We should have been going. We're hoping to go in three or 4 weeks' time if travel is back on track. We enjoyed going to Turkey, a place called Kalkan. I love New York. Did New York 2 or 3 times. Loved it. I love being able to walk around. You can walk for miles there, can't you? And we were there. I think it was 2010, or it was the time of when the volcano in Iceland erupted,
right?
And flights were grounded. So we got stuck there for 3 weeks. This is magic, and we'd gone as a package with Virgin Airways, so they paid for everything. The only thing they didn't pay for was the drinks, and we tried to get some laundry done in the Chinese laundry next door, but they wouldn't pay for that. But everything else, the hotel. So we had our holiday was extended by 2 weeks, thanks to the Icelandic volcano and Virgin Airways. Brilliant. Loved it.
I see you didn't mention Winnipeg on that list of favorite places.
Now Winnipeg was, that must be going back 30 years because our daughter was only about 5. We've gone back 35 years. Winnipeg, in the days of an airline called Ward Air.
Yes, Ward Air.
Remember Ward Air?
Yes, I do.
Big jumbo jets. And that was magical because my wife's cousin was a lecturer biology, I think, at Winnipeg University. So we went there. I think we 3 or 4 weeks over there. And they took us on trips and visits. I thought Winnipeg was a wonderful place. They took us on a camping weekend to a place called Riding Mountain, which is maybe 200 miles away from Winnipeg. And the 200 miles in between Winnipeg and Riding Mountain is flat as a pancake. You could fall asleep at the wheel of the driving car and wake up 200 miles later exactly where you want to be. And that was Riding Mountain. And we saw bears and moose, and it was terrific. That was a camping weekend. Camping in the woods.
I trust that was you wouldn't be there in the wintertime because Winnipeg is one of the coldest places.
Oh no, it was. Yeah. God, it was hot. It was hot. So I felt like Bill Bryson, walking in the woods, surrounded by bears. You carried a pan around with you, and wherever you walked in the wood, you rattled a pan or you banged a pan lid just to make sure you scared the bears away. That's an abiding memory.
When you talk about flat, the province next to it is Saskatchewan is known for being flat.
That's the one, Saskatchewan, yeah.
The joke is that if your dog runs away, 3 days later, you'll still see it.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
That's it for me, Phil. If you don't, I wanted one of the last things I wanted. We saved it till last. Is basically the new book you've just published, and one of the most controversial, colorful figures in Burnley's history is Bob Lord.
Definitely tell us where folks can order a copy of this too.
Where can they? Well, can you get things from Amazon in the US?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, it's on Amazon. You can get it from Amazon, and it's probably cheaper than getting it. I mean, if you get it from me, the postage is horrendous. I think it's cheaper to get it from Amazon.
Do you do better if we get it from you? Because I'd rather spend more money and give it all to you than give anybody to Amazon at all. So where can we get it from where you do the best?
I'd go with Amazon if I mean, having said that, I've only got about 2 copies in the box here. I'd go with Amazon, because you'll get it. You're more likely to get it quicker, and I'm sure postage is cheaper via Amazon than it is from me. It's something crazy like £17, which is how many dollars? About $35, is that?
Yeah, right about there. I know it's like right now. I think the exchange rate is $10 or £10, about $13 right now.
Yeah.
So
no, I'd do it via Amazon if I were you. Honestly, it's much more efficient. Plus, which I'm from tomorrow or the day after. I'm away for a couple of weeks, so I wouldn't be able to do it till I get back in a couple of weeks. And it always worries me. It always worries me that if I send things I'm going to do send things to the US and Australia, that it actually gets there. I mean, one of my best customers, in fact, he comes over to the UK quite often, is a guy called John Gibault from Seattle, or just Portland.
I actually, he's a listener to the show. I follow him.
Oh, that's good. Well,
Twitter.
John, if you listen to this show, greetings, John. He's not, well, obviously with COVID and travel problems, he's not coming across for the foreseeable future.
I sent him an Accrington Stanley Supporters Club of North America pin. Tony and I started an Accrington Stanley Supporters Club of North America, so we're actually an arm of the official supporters club in England. Over here in North America, we have pins and everything, and I know John is someone that I've sent one of the pins to.
Yeah. Well, just as I say, I just want to touch on Bob Lord because of what he did for the club and his rise from being working in the butcher shop and the success he had. But some of the things that I think one of the things I read was some of the problems he had with the press, and wasn't in '64 where he thought that Match of the Day coming in would sort of be the ruin of football, or like he didn't like any banned.
He had mixed views on it. Initially, he was very anti-television, but only because they wouldn't pay the going rate. If the BBC had paid decent money from the word go, He would have been quite happy with things. But they paid peanuts, absolute peanuts. That's what he didn't like. He did worry that if there was too much football on TV, it would produce, too many people who preferred to watch on TV rather than going to a live game. But that was only a minor worry of his, I think. His main grumble was the poor payments, which is why he banned the cameras one time. That got him in a lot of bother. You're not coming, he said. I'm not having it here. I mean, I forget offhand what the BBC paid, but it was ridiculous. And his argument was, if you go to the theatre, you pay top prices to see top artists, and it's the same with football. You're seeing top sportsmen, you're seeing top footballers. So if you want them on TV, you pay the going rate. He would be astonished, and he would rub his hands with glee if he was around now. And he saw the money that was in the game from TV, he'd be over the moon, absolutely over the moon.
One of the things, and we get a lot of obviously Accrington Stanley supporters that listen to our podcast. We cover the team, and we talk to the coaching staff and the owner and the players. And there's obviously his history has passed. There's been a lot of sort of myths come out about Bob Lord and Stanley. And I mean, I think, based on what I've read, he seems to get a bad rap on that. Can you just clarify?
I mean, yeah, he unfortunately he gets the blame for it and did at the time. But if you delve deeper into it, the other guy who was very much to blame was the Football League secretary, Alan Hardacre. Because if I remember right, my problem is I can write a book and 12 months later I've forgotten half of what's in it. If I remember rightly, Accrington appealed. They sent their letter of resignation in, but then some offers of money came in, or rescue package or whatever.
Correct.
And they asked to retrieve that letter of resignation. But it was Alan Hardacre who said, no, sorry, it's too late. Not Bob Lord.
No, and there was a fellow involved with the club, Sam Pilkington, and didn't he ask Bob Lord for when he said, when I say help out, did he ask him for just advice or what?
I think it was just advice, not for money.
Yeah.
What he wanted was to tap into Bob Lord's business acumen, because Bob Lord always said a football club has to be run on business lines. It can't go into the red. And even long before Bob Lord got there, that club was in the red because they'd bought it. Oh, it's all in the Bob Lord book, but they'd bought a big new stand from somewhere.
It was
transported it lock, stock, and barrel.
Aldershot Tattoo. Yeah, they bought it from the Aldershot Tattoo and paid I don't know, $2,000, but they never calculated the reconstruction costs or the assembly costs.
That's right. And therein lies the ruin of Accrington Stanley. That's what got them into debt. Then they began selling players, etc., etc. Bob Lord said, well, I'll help. I'll give you the benefit of my advice, wisdom, business sense, if you like. But he said to the board of directors, you lot have got to go. I'll come in and help as long as you lot resign. Well, some of them did, some of them didn't.
Yeah.
But I think it was good. I think Sam Pilkington was the chairman, wasn't he?
I think he was. I think he was, and then he resigned, and I think the four remaining board members sent the letter in, and then when you said as the money started to be offered to help, Hardacre said no to the second letter, and if you look back,
it was Hardacre put the final vote in. So Bob Lord much maligned there, and stories that he wanted to see them out of business because it would benefit Burnley, I think are nonsense, absolute nonsense.
I think that's what that's as time has gone on, and the story gets a life of its own, and that's why I wanted to check because it's obviously when you delve into it, like you say, some of the comments that come around about Bob Lord, some are accurate and some are colorful. But I think when
a much maligned figure, and in many cases quite rightly so, but in some cases wrongly. I mean, as far as Burnley Football Club went, he loved that club to bits. He made them what they are. I mean, he's still there in the bricks and mortar. He put them. He built the foundations of that club. Okay, he stayed too long. He should have resigned at least a year before he did, because he was using that club to prop up his own lifestyle. I mean, again, it's all in the book. I won't go into detail, but he was siphoning money out in his expense claims and petrol claims and this and that, the other. So he was managing to take money out of the club, but he stayed on too long, that's for sure. He just couldn't bear to let go.
Yeah.
Because it was his life. It was his life.
Well, how is the book doing, Dave? Is it doing well?
Oh, steady. Yeah. The disappointing thing is it never made the national press. We thought, Mike and I, we wrote it together. We both thought, right, what a name, Bob Lord. He's a big name. His name is up there with Shankly, Busby, these people, Reevy, in terms of being a big, big name. He had such an impact on football, such an influence. All his predictions have come true, except for one, funnily enough. He predicted that Burnley would fade away into oblivion. Well, they haven't, have they? That's ironically, the only prediction he got wrong in terms of what happened to Burnley.
an ideal one for him to get wrong, I would say. And,
Yeah.
It's really been an honor having you on the show here, Dave. And before we wrap up, I did have one last question that I wanted to ask you. And that's, you've written over 20 books. And of course, we just talked about the new one, and we've talked about a few of your other ones. But say that our listeners were to go out on Amazon or eBay or wherever it would be, and
which would I recommend?
Book, yes, which one of the 20 would you recommend? What's your favorite one that you've ever written, I guess, if you could?
Well, crikey. I think I would go for the Bob Lord, because it was such... It was a massive project, and it took two of us to do it. And we found out so many things. And Mike Smith, co-author, he took the first two sections, which is the very early history, from when Bob is born to 55 or whatever it is when he becomes chairman. And then I carried on. Mike is a wizard at going into archives, libraries, births, marriages, deaths, all this kind of thing, of tracking things, tracing things. And he's a wizard at doing that. Now, to be honest, that bores me. I just love sitting talking to people, gossiping. Gossip is gossip an American word as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good old-fashioned.
That's what this show is built
talking,
around.
Yeah.
It's just
listening to people's stories. Teasing things out of them, like with Stan Turner yesterday. I just love doing this. That's why it's so easy doing the Paul Weller book, because he's there to talk to. And he's given me the list of 10 other players and their phone numbers. I've talked to all of them, some face-to-face, some on the phone. And it's a pleasure doing this. Doing the Jimmy Adamson book, able to talk to Colin Waldron, Paul Fletcher, all these people. That's the fun for me, actually talking to people, hearing the stories, getting them written down.
Hit the nail on the head, because for Tony and myself, I know that one of the best parts about doing the podcast is just getting to talk to someone like yourself. It's just such an honor to get to spend an hour with you, or obviously someone like John Coleman or anyone.
Listen, my problem is I talk too much, I think. I get carried away.
Oh no! I tell you,
we've enjoyed every minute of your stories, and that's actually the last thing that we always ask is, what didn't we ask you about that you wanted to make sure you talked about today?
Oh well, I felt sure you would ask, what is my favorite book I've ever written?
Well, that's kind of where I was going with that last question.
Yeah, but it's an impossible to answer because they're all so different. And you get pride in doing them for different reasons. The Bob Lord book, because it was a pleasure. And it worked so well working with Mike Smith. We never had a crossword in 12 months. We never had a difference of opinion. No, that's magical.
I thought
that's impossible.
I thought you were going to say, Dave, it's not been written yet, your favorite book.
Well, this is the thing about Burnley Football Club. There's so much history, so much still to write. I mean, the Andy Payton story would be a fantastic story. It's another story of redemption and rebirth. I don't know if you follow him on Facebook, and Andy Payton. The way he's turned his life around is just astonishing. He was a gambler. He was into drugs. He was a drinker. And then roughly, I don't know how many years ago, he lost fortunes. He was highly paid, and he lost fortunes. He owned property. Lost it all. He was in all kinds of trouble. So there's a great story there of how he's brought himself around. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't gamble. He's trimmed himself down to his playing weight of just 12 stone. Fantastic story. Then there's the John Bond season. Now that's another one that's fascinating. John Bond, that 1 year at Burnley. That's another one that's still to write. And I've got this bucket list of things still to do. So the John Bond one might be the next one. Might be, if I can afford the ink.
What about
computer ink is so expensive, isn't it?
What about the 2 volumes No Nay Never Burnley anthology? I imagine that those are probably pretty detailed projects because they cover such a large part of history.
Well, they were, and then I did two more follow-ups with a different name. What was it called? I've got one here now, and I don't think these are on Amazon. Oh, The Best of Burnley, they call it, The Best of Burnley. Another Burnley FC anthology. So they're similar to the No Nay Never ones in that they're just a collection of art. And they're great because you just get to go and talk to people.
Where does that No Nay Never come from? What's that?
Well, it's the Burnley song, isn't it? It's the Burnley anthem. No Nay Never.
No Nay Never No More. Yeah.
Well, No Nay Never No More. It's an Irish song, isn't it?
I don't know the origin of it, but all I know is every time you listen to Burnley or watch Burnley on the television, you hear that song in the background.
Never.
Yep.
No Nay Never No More. Yep. I will play Blackburn Rovers. No Nay Never No More. That's how it goes.
Well,
I think originally it's an Irish song. Might be wrong.
I'll tell you one thing. I didn't think talking about a Burnley podcast, I didn't think we'd ever work in the term or the words Blackburn Rovers. So well done, David.
Oh, brilliant. Well, let's just say, let's all laugh at Blackburn Rovers. What a sad story that is, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
It's astonishing that the Venkis are still there. Astonishing.
I'll tell you one thing for me, David. It's been a real treat, a privilege to discuss, talk to you today and go over your books and your love of Burnley. And thanks for sharing your time with us today. It's been a real thrill.
My pleasure. Tell me when you're hanging up. Are you going to press the red button? And then I'll know.
Well, we're
gonna hang up at my end.
We're gonna wrap up now. But I did before we wrap up, I did have one question that I meant to add into the rapid fire that I forgot about. And honestly, I don't know if this is something that you're familiar with or not, because they don't have these in England anymore, but you have been to the States and things. So I just wanted to ask if you ever got mixed up with the founder of the Wendy's restaurant, if you ever got his mail or anything like that.
The Wendy's restaurant?
Yeah, there's a big hamburger chain here in the States, and the founder of the Wendy's restaurant chain was named Dave Thomas, and he was in all the commercials. So I just wondered if you ever got
he was called Dave Thomas.
Call for him or something.
Oh no! I bet he's got more money than I've got.
That we could finish with the No Nay Never on that one, couldn't we, Dave?
We could indeed. Yes. There's this myth that I'm a millionaire writing Burnley Football Club. There truly is. People really think I make money out of it, but I don't think I'm. By the time I paid expenses and all the research and travelled and bought ink and God knows what, I don't think I made a penny out of any of these books, because they don't sell that. They don't sell that in thousands at all. And the Bob Law book, for example, is £20 in the UK. Now I get 10% of half of that. So what's 10% of £10? That's £1, isn't it? And and Mike and I share that. So this is true. This is as true as my father's glass eye. I make 50p out of a £20 Bob Lord book. And people think I make money.
It's a labor of love.
It's a passion.
It is. It is.
It's a passion.
It is.
Yep.
It is.
Well,
right then. Okay then.
Great.
Well, Dave, we can't thank you enough for spending your time with us, and hopefully we could do this again in the future. Definitely.
No problem. No problem. Just message me on Facebook and follow Andy Payton on Facebook.
Well, next time you have a book out, we'll have you on, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll be March. This Paul Weller book should be out in about March. I mean, it would be nice if I put you in touch with Paul Weller.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
He enjoys talking.
Yeah,
he enjoys chatting. Yeah.
Where can folks find you on Twitter?
I am at Rodley Dave. That's at and then RODLEY Dave at Rodley Dave.
Excellent. And I followed you and shared you out on there this morning, and I will keep you posted. We should have the episode live here with about the next 24 hours, and I'll let you know as soon as it's up and running.
Let me know. Yeah. So where does it go on Facebook or Twitter? What do you do with it?
It goes on everywhere. It goes on our website, acrossthepitch.com. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, basically anywhere you consume podcasts, we're available.
Okay, right.
And
right. I look forward to hearing myself.
We posted on a couple of the Burnley Facebook group pages, so you'll find it, Dave. We'll let you know when it's out.
Okay, right. Anyway, my pleasure talking to you. It just seems surreal. I'm talking to a guy in Ontario and a guy in Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona. This is an iconic name, isn't it? Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
It's sort of a glamour name. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Well, when we started the show, we wanted to pick an area and teams that were kind of central to the birthplace of football, and that was why we picked Accrington, Stanley, and Lancashire, because that's where the 1888 football league and all the history just really comes from that area. We wanted to tell the whole story from the beginning to American listeners, that there's more than just Manchester United out there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm hanging up now. Okay.
Cheers, Dave.